TSN's Motoring 94 is brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas. For brake, exhaust, suspension, and steering service, trust your car to Midas.
If you're in the market for a new car and you have a very generous bank manager, may I suggest you drop down to your local Ferrari dealer. This is the new 348 Spyder. It's the first soft top produced by Ferrari since 1971. It's also part of a new racing series, and we'll tell you more about that later on. We'll also show you a Ferrari that comes equipped with 760 horses and a top speed of over 380 kilometers an hour. But first, you know, they're always telling us about the harmful effects of the sun, and for good reason. But we met some students from McGill University in Montreal, and they think that big ball of energy up there may play a big part in the future of the automobile. The vehicle is the first solar-powered car built in the province of Quebec. 14 undergraduate and graduate students from McGill University in Montreal began the project 3 years ago. The group calls itself Team Raw Power, after the Egyptian sun god. The team was invited to compete in the Sun Race 93 competition and finished 11th out of 34 teams from across North America.
Initially, it was tough to sell because most people didn't believe that we could do it, didn't believe that we could build a solar-powered car. But once they started to see the project come together, that's when they really came together. And initially, it was very difficult getting money. Recessionary times, more companies were willing to support or supply materials more so than money. The money really came at the end when the car was complete, so we need money to get down to the race, and this is actually where we got a lot of provincial support. But all in all, sponsors very, very pleased with the project. Very happy to see that they're part of a winning cause.
John's cleaning the panel.
Solar energy is captured by the solar array. That's the solar cells in the back of the car. That energy is then transformed into electricity, stored in batteries. The car basically is able to run off either solar energy or the batteries themselves. The power itself is the amount of actually energy that's generated from the solar cells is about 750 watts. We equate that with about the same amount of energy that takes to run a standard hairdryer. So it's not hurtling down a track at 120 kilometers an hour. That's really the way the energy itself works there. Top speed, we have not yet actually qualified. We project a speed of about 50 to 55 miles an hour. We hope to get a chance to prove that today. Brakes are, they're just standard disc brakes. In the front and the back, we've got actually bicycle brakes, but can stop in a very short distance. In fact, part requirements for Sun Race 93 were that cars had to be able to stop within a required distance. Well, the body itself is constructed of two materials, Kevlar and Nomex. Most people know Kevlar as a bulletproof material used in obviously bulletproof vests. Very lightweight. The body, as is seen on the car, everything that you see that's red weighs 100 pounds. So very lightweight, yet incredibly strong.
Ready? Yeah.
The reason I got involved in this project was more of as a design challenge and to give me some experience with designing for the future. And hopefully in the future, car manufacturers go towards vehicles of this kind. I think they've got no choice. We've got approximately 30 years left of fossil fuels to use up for gasoline. And I think the manufacturers are leading to electric vehicles.
The cynics may sit back and say, well, a lot of money's been invested. McGill University students have put it together. What have we gained, and what kind of learning have we gained from this?
Well, at least I think one has to look at the educational aspect of this. I mean, as I say, we put together a group of 14 students who invested a lot of time. Let's not forget these fellows were going to school all day long and doing this nights and weekends. But it's been a great educational experience. I think for a lot of these fellows to say, you know, I designed and built a solar-powered car is something special. Sure, this is maybe technology you're not going to see 30 or 40 years down the line, or you're not going to see cars like this on the road. But as I say, what a wonderful experience for a group of students to have had the opportunity to participate in this project. A lot of fun.
Tell me the experience. What's it been like? Were there times where you thought, can we do it?
Well, if anything, because I was not the engineer in the group itself, these guys just incredible determination. I mean, I can think back to the last 3 Christmases when I was comfortably ensconced with family at home and these fellows were working away in the lab, they had such determination. I knew from day one that they would do it. I knew that from day one this would be a success. Not too often I get a good feeling about people like that, but these guys, as I say, just incredibly dedicated.
Proud time, huh?
Extremely proud time, yeah. It was all worth it after those 3 years of hard work, determination, sacrifices. It's all worth it.
Test Drive with Graham Fletcher.
This week on Test Drive, we look at the 1994 Volkswagen Jetta. Now, in the past, the Jetta has accounted for almost half of all of Volkswagen sales, but because the old car had reached the end of its useful life, it had begun to lose market share. That makes this particular car a very important car for Volkswagen if they're to regain that lost market share. At the heart of any good car is a good engine, and the engine found in the Jetta is certainly that. Displacement is measured at 2 litres, with power being rated at 115 horses and 121 pounds-feet of torque. One of the things that differentiates this engine from the majority of the competition is the fact that it only has 8 valves rather than the usual 16. The advantage to this is that you have access to the torque at very low RPM. This means that throttle response is good right from the word go all the way up to the red line. During the skid pad test, we required just over 8 seconds to eclipse the 100k mark. The intriguing part is that the car feels substantially faster than the clock indicates. Matched with this nifty engine is a smooth shifting 5-speed manual transmission that is very easy to use. Gone are the bad old days when you had to be a master chef if you were going to stir the shifter into the right gear. The clutch action complements the whole setup nicely. The feel is light and the bite point very easy to find. The suspension on this Jetta is comprised of McPherson struts up front, a torsion beam axle in back and sway bars both back and front. Now, the reason this car handles the pylon test so well for a family sedan is the fact that the torsion beam axle actually imparts a certain amount of four-wheel steer. It gives the car a very precise, sure-footed feel. Out on the open road, the suspension continues to do its thing very well. Not only is the feel solid, it is also very comfortable. Combine that with a steering setup that offers the right weight and good on-center feel, and some of the best seats in the market, and you as the driver are free to enjoy the pleasure of driving. In some of the advertising Volkswagen are using for this new Jetta, they suggest that when it comes to safety, this car is not middle of the road. Well, I'd take issue with that statement, because while it's true they've got crumple zones front and rear, they've reinforced the side of the car for side impacts, they've missed the boat on 2 key elements on the base model. There's no airbags and there's no anti-lock brakes. They are available as options on the GL, as our tester is. However, the cost of that package is $5,300. Add that to the GL car and you're looking at a vehicle that's over $22,000. Now that for a car in this segment is far too much money, and they're going to lose a lot of sales because of that price. Up front, the seats offer plenty of support, especially lumbar and lateral, as well as ample adjustment. In the rear, you'll find an abundance of room, both head and leg room being better than average. One of the aspects of Volkswagen design I've always admired is the simplistic approach they take. There's a model set of analog instruments sitting right ahead of you. On either side of the column are the wipers and turn signals. The radio sits high enough in the dash that you can actually see it using peripheral vision. And the heater controls, because they're large and rotary, are very easy to use. A lot of other manufacturers could take a lesson in how to use a simplistic approach. One of the common complaints with compact cars is the size of the trunk. Well, the trunk on this Volkswagen is absolutely enormous. It is larger than any other compact car, and in fact it rivals most mid-sized cars for sheer volume. When you add to that the versatility of a fold-down rear seat, there isn't much you're not going to be able to get into this thing. The stopping power on the GL is provided by a 4-wheel disc brake setup that gives you ventilated rotors up front and solid in the rear.
During the brake test, the system functioned flawlessly, requiring just 112 feet to stop from 80k. The thing that struck me during these tests is that the stops are straight and easily modulated, despite the lack of anti-lock. The degree of balance in the system being down to the brake pressure modulator. This thing ensures no more than the right amount of braking goes to the rear brakes. This means that the risk of locking one of the rear brakes mid-corner is kept to a minimum, and therefore so is the risk of a spin. Rather reassuring, all things being considered. Well, that's it for this week's test drive. I think it's safe to say that this edition of the Jetta is vastly superior to the one it replaces. However, I remain convinced that the lack of airbags and anti-lock brakes on the base model is going to hurt their sales.
As I mentioned earlier, the introduction of the Ferrari 348 has spawned a brand new racing series called the 348 Challenge. Now, there'll be 7 races in North America, 1 in Canada at Mostport Racetrack in July. Now, the overall North American winner will get the opportunity to travel to Europe and compete against the European winners at Ferrari's famous Mugello racetrack. Well, it's now time to join Bill Gardner. He's obviously not home right now. He must be at the shop. Here's Bill.
Brad, you know how I got to afford a house like that? By doing my own car repairs. And driving a Chevette for quite a few years too. But in any case, let's get back to reality here and talk about our subject for this week, which is heater fans. Now, the 2 most common things you would have to replace this heater fan for, the 2 most common problems, are either a totally inoperative fan or a noisy fan. And those are pretty common things on today's cars. And this is a task that many do-it-yourselfers could tackle. Now, the first thing you want to do, of course, if the fan's inoperative, is to check the fuse. That's the most logical thing. But if the fuse is okay, the next thing you want to do is come out under the hood, locate the heater fan, and turn the key on in the car, but don't start the engine. You don't want that background noise. So with the key on, go to all the heater connections and wiggle them around. Now, the problem with this one is that the fan's awful noisy, and you can hear that rumbling sound that it's making. Now, another common problem is connection problems. Now, you can see that this connection is covered with a rubber plug and it's nice and clean. But when you go down to the next connection below it, which is the ground connection, you can see that the ground blade is all green and our connector is green as well. And that's a bad enough connection that it could potentially stop this fan from working. But if that was the problem and you came out here and wiggled that connection with the key on and the fan turned on, you'd surely get a good enough connection that it would try a little bit. You'd get some noise out of it, and you'd know that's what you'd have to clean up. Now, I'm going to remove this fan. I've already taken all the screws out of it, and I'll pull it out of the heater cavity so that you can see it pretty well, and I'll plug it back in. You heard that noise that it made when it started up, and you can see the imbalance in this one. It's wobbling quite a bit, and that's part and parcel of what wears it out. Now, these motors are lubed for life. They have a little felt wick in them that's impregnated with oil. So eventually it dries out and they do wear themselves out. Now, this isn't a real expensive part. It's between $40 and $100 depending on the make, model, and year of car you've got. And in many cases, like this particular car, it's fairly easy to get at, 6 or 8 screws and it's out. So it is a task that the average do-it-yourselfer could tackle. Usually only 1 or 2 tools required to get it out. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 94.
Whitby, Ontario was the site this summer for what could be called a love-in. The event was by invitation only. The location, Ultimate Customs. These beauties were mostly owned by the customers.
Really, we're a one-stop customizing shop. We handle everything from chassis builds. We move into body and custom body, be it restoration or full custom body. We can finish up with some paint and do full interior. Mostly the people that are on hand today are customers that we have performed work to their vehicles, and they were gracious enough to come back for the day to let other people see what we do. We have been recession-free for the past year. We have been booked solid 12 weeks in advance. We have a stack of work orders coming up that's unbelievable. Most of our winter is booked already. So it's growing. It's very, very strong in Canada finally.
It's a 1949 Studebaker, and it's a hot rod. It's basically how I get around. It is customized. It's been chopped. It's got a Chevy front end, a Chevy motor. It's got louvers in it. It's got an up-to-date interior. What there is of it, it's not quite finished. But it just basically is a daily driver. I've been doing this now, I guess, about 8 years, and at that time I was quite an oddity. A lot of people would just ignore me because they figured it was my husband's car. And now it's a lot more common for women to be in it, whether they're driving their husband's car, or more frequently there are a lot more women that own their own cars, own their own trucks, drive them, work on them. It's not a sex thing anymore where this is a man's or a woman's vehicle. It's just we want to have fun, and this is how we do it. And Lloyd built that, didn't he?
Well, Lloyd changed the chassis.
It's a 1986 Chevy S10. It's fully modified to the max, starting off with a rear tub section in the rear. It's a small block Chevy, V8, supercharged, nitrous, pushing probably close to 400 horsepower. It's a well done leather interior, billet goodies all over the place. Just total tricked out. When I originally purchased it, I paid $5,500 for it. Since then, I've probably invested over $65,000 into it over a good 4-year period.
It's a 1970 Plymouth Cuda. We tubbed it, put a Ford 9-inch rear end in it, a John Rossiter blown motor, full cage, wheelie bars, parachute, rear Pro Mod wing, 23 coats of paint, 4 coats of clear, all custom interior, custom seats. Lloyd here did a lot of it. Bigger wheels, different rims. Every year we do something different to the car.
Why?
Boring. Change it every year. To come out, we do a lot of car shows, and if the car is more than a year old, you don't seem to win as much, and we're out there to win. I've had the car 14 years. I bought it from Auto Wreckers for $180 as a write-off. I've got about $54,000 into it now. It's appraised for $74,000. To sell the car, I might be lucky to get $35,000 out of it. Never get back what you pay for it. We used to drive it on the street, but now with the rear wing on it, the police seem to hassle us. The blower coming through the hood, obstruct vision, too big of tires on the back. So we trailer it mostly everywhere, except if the car show's close, we will drive it. It only gets 4 miles to the gallon, so we've got to plan our gas stations. It's got 1,100 horse, and when you start playing with it on the street, it gets tempting. Every car you pull up to, you just want to hammer it.
There's a lot of excitement among Ferrari enthusiasts these days, and this is one of the reasons. The 348 Spyder, Ferrari's first convertible since the introduction of the Daytona Spyder in 1971. This past summer, the Spyder met its predecessor as Mosport was the scene for a special tribute to Ferrari.
The purpose of this weekend is something that we do every year. It is the roots of Ferrari. That's what Ferrari is all about, is to be enjoyed and the environment of racing, because Ferrari was known always to be a race car, and that's what it is, really. Even the road cars. So our customers get a chance to drive their cars on a racetrack and without watching over the shoulder for the police.
Among the special guests was the F40 Le Monde.
There was only 19 LM built. This is number 19. Are the 19 two this one here, and number 18 are with special suspension and special engines. We got the last one. The previous to this one here, which is number 18, will stay at the factory at their museum. What difference is between this and the other 17? The pushrod suspension and the more power.
Power is rated at?
Yeah, 760 horsepower. And over 380 kilometers an hour, so it's fast enough.
Despite the world recession, Ramo Ferri has sold over 20 cars this year and believes the 348 Spyder will prove popular. The 1971 model became a collector's favorite, but Ferrari's technical director, Umberto Massoni, says driving one is still the true test of this great thoroughbred.
It's very nice to have cars that are also purchased by a collector, but it's also very nice to have this kind of opportunity as we have today, which is a lot of customers driving their own car, enjoying the track and enjoying themselves among the others.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns brake flex hoses. Most cars have at least 3 and sometimes 4 of these hoses, and as their name implies, they're flexible, rubber and fabric reinforced hoses that allow flexibility out at the wheels. In order for this wheel to steer left and right and travel up and down with the suspension, we need these hoses. Now keep in mind that throughout most of the vehicle, the brake hydraulic pressure is carried in steel pipes, but when it gets out to the wheel, we've got to have that flexibility. Now you can see that with the wheel in the straight ahead position, that flex hose is fairly loose. There's a lot of slack in it, but as the wheel is turned slowly out to the left, the hose becomes stretched fairly tight. Now over a period of years, eventually those hoses will crack near the ends because of that stretching, and they may become weather checked or get blisters on their exterior. And another thing that can afflict these hoses, for example on a rear wheel drive vehicle, is if somebody over greases the upper ball joint. Grease can drip onto the hose, and of course when you get petroleum products on rubber items like this, it's going to affect them, it's going to rot them quite quickly. So anytime your brake system is serviced, inspected, or for example parts replaced like pads, shoes, a master cylinder, etc., make sure that these hoses are carefully inspected and replace any that have fatigued or damaged sections. Another thing is they can easily become abraded or chafed by wheels or other suspension parts on the vehicle, and any signs of that is cause for replacement. That's your Midas tip of the week.
Ferrari has a glorious past, and the present doesn't look bad either. But does it have a future? I'll be right back in Kenzies Corner.
Kenzies Corner with Jim Kenzie.
Ferrari, it's got to be the most magical name in the car business. Now, the appeal of a car like this obviously isn't limited to the way in which it discharges its transportation responsibilities. No, driving a Ferrari makes you part of an image that's been carefully constructed over nearly 50 years. The image is a combination of gorgeous styling, advanced technology, the passion we've always felt for Italian cars, and the company's incredible success in racing. Still, we've got to remember that names like Hispano Suiza, Stutz, and Duesenberg meant as much to our fathers and grandfathers as Ferrari does to us. And all those great names are history. So how does this bode for Ferrari? Well, it's never easy to stay on top. Advances in technology today are as available to Toyota and Ford as they are to Ferrari, and the company hasn't had much success in racing in recent years either. They've just moved their Formula One racing headquarters to England from Italy to be closer to the center of racing's universe. A Ferrari mechanic named Trevor instead of Paolo? Well, it's already happened. Still, I hope Ferrari can find a way to continue to prosper. After all, they've got me convinced. I just hope they can continue to succeed, so Ferrari will mean as much to my children as it does to me. I'm Jim Kenzie.
I'm standing beside Highway 401 just outside of Toronto. Now, drivers in this area have noticed new markings along the highway. Now, these markings apparently are here to promote safer driving. Are they working? Well, we'll try and find out next week as we bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
TSN's Motoring 94 has been brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil. And Midas, for brake, exhaust, suspension, and steering service, trust your car to Midas.